Hello everyone, hello my dear students. I'm Shafiqa Jafarova, an assistant of the anatomy department of the veterinary faculty. Today is my second lecture on ADAUTV, and I'm very happy to be here again. This lecture is also, so the subject is anatomy of domestic animals, and this lecture is also for the veterinary students, or the first grade veterinary students, but of course not only first grade, but all students of the veterinary faculty, and everyone who just interested in this topic can listen and ask questions about this topic. The topic of today's lecture is the anatomical structure of the organ of vision, the anatomical structure of the eye. I'd like to show here the plan of today's lecture. So first of all, I'm going to give you some general information about the sense organs and especially about the eye. Then, so we are going to talk about the structure of the eyeball, about the external and the internal structure of the eyeball, structure of the inner part of the eyeball, about the lens, about the vitreous body. And then the next part is the adnexa. Adnexa means the accessory organs, the organs which help to form the image in the eye. And we are going to talk about the blood supply and innervation of the eye. Here you can see the textbooks and the materials which I used to prepare this lecture. And so I always recommend the first book, the textbook of veterinary anatomy of domestic animals. This textbook is very useful for all students. It's atlas, and I recommend it to all my students again and again. So let's get started. The organ of vision in Latin is called organum visus. So the part and the branch of anatomy which studies the sense organs is called aesthesiology. In Latin, aesthesiologia. You know that there are 5 main sense organs in the body of human or in the animal body, and one of the most complex, most compound organs is the organ of vision, is the eye. In Latin, it's called organum visus. What is the function of the organum visus? The function of organum visus is to get the information, to get the light, the photic energy from the external environment by means of photoreceptors, then convert this energy into the chemical energy, and then this chemical energy into the electric energy, and transmit these nerve impulses by means of the optic nerve toward the brain, toward the cerebral cortex. As I said, the eye is one of the most complex organs, most compound organs, because by use of this organ we can get maximum information from the outside. Just by looking at some object, we can understand the shape, the size, the location, the color of the object. So if we compare this organ with other sense organs, we can understand that eye and the organ of vision provides maximum information from the external environment. Let's talk about the main components of the vision system. The main components of the vision system, first of all, is the eyeball. Eyeball in Latin is bulbus oculi. Then adnexa. Adnexa, as I said, is accessory organs of the eye. Then the optic nerve, which provide the transmission of the signals to the cognitive parts of the brain. And of course, the visual area, the visual center of the cerebral cortex. So if we talk about the eyeball, if we talk about the structure of the eyeball, first of all, I'd like to mention that the shape of the eyeball is not absolutely rounded. It's not evenly rounded organ. It looks like a globe, and it consists of 2 curvatures, anterior curvature and posterior curvature. Anterior curvature occupies the least part of the eyeball, but the most part is the posterior curvature. Anterior and posterior curvature meet at the sulcus sclerae, in Latin sulcus sclerae, which means sulcus groove. The shape, the size of the eyeball is very different, depends on the species of domestic animals. So here you can see the eyeball of the cat, dog, ox and horse, and you can see that their shape are really very different, and as well as size is very different. For example, the diameter of the eyeball in the duck is 20 millimeters, in the cat 24 millimeters. While if we talk about the size of the horse, the size of the eyeball, so it's about from 40 to 50 millimeters in diameter. But if we compare the size of the eyeball and if we compare the size of eyeball corrected for the body size, we can say that the biggest eyeball had the cat. Again, I'd like to mention that when I say that the biggest eyeball is found in the cat, it means that I just compare the size corrected for the body size. So the biggest eyeball is in the cat, but the smallest eyeball is in the pig. In the pig's body, the eyeball is the smallest. Another very important moment is the directional terms and directional planes of the eyeball. You can see here the structure of the eyeball, and the eyeball has two main points, two main parts. The most prominent part is called anterior pole, pollice anterior in Latin, and the most prominent posterior part is called pollice posterior in Latin again, anterior pole and posterior pole. Besides, like a globe, eyeball is also has equator and meridians. What are the meridians? Meridians are the lines which connect the anterior pole and posterior pole on the surface of the eyeball. But what about the equator? Equator is the maximum circumference midway between the two poles, anterior and posterior pole. Besides these poles, there is also axis. There are two axes of the eyeball. There is external axis of the eyeball, axis externus bulbi, and axis externus and axis internus bulbi. So internal and external axis. The external axis is also called optic axis. And what is the function of this axis? This axis connects the anterior pole and posterior pole. So here you can see this axis. This is a line which connects to each other, the anterior and posterior pole. So why we need to know this information? So here you can see the schematic illustration of the eyeballs of the human. And here you can see the optic axis and the medial line, the medial surface. Medial surface is a surface which divides the body into two equal symmetrical parts. So remember, if this middle surface is parallel with the optic axis and these lines are located parallel to each other, it means that the vision which we get from the right and left eye, they are overlapped. So we have binocular vision. However, if we look at the for example, at the vision of the cat or of the horse, we can see that mainly they have monocular vision. They don't have binocular vision. What is the reason of that? The reason is that there is some degree of angle between the optic axis and median surface. So, for example, in the horse, the axis of the eyeball and the medial line, medial surface, are located under 90 degrees. So because of that, the eyeballs of the horse are located laterally, and horse can see mainly the periphery of its surroundings than the front part. However, in the cat, this degree is equal to the 20-30 degrees, and because of that, they have larger portion of binocular vision than the horse. Horse has smallest portion of the binocular vision. You can ask what is the reason of such differences between the level of binocular and monocular vision. First of all, it is a lifestyle. Those animals which are predator animals, they mainly have eyeballs which are set forward. So they see the distance, they see the area which locates in front of them. However, the animals which are hunted animals, they mainly have eyeballs which are set laterally, and they mainly have better peripheral vision in order to keep eye on the predator and in order to be always able to protect themselves from against these predators. Then, let's talk about the structure of the eyeball itself. So the eyeball has, as I said, the external part and the internal part. The external part of the eyeball is presented by the three concentric layers, where one layer overlaps another layer. Here you can see the three layers from the outside to the internal part. The first layer, the outermost layer, is called tunica fibrosa bulbi, in Latin, tunica fibrosa bulbi. In English, fibrous layer. The second or middle layer is a vascular layer, tunica vasculosa bulbi, and the inner layer, tunica interna bulbi. So here you can see again a schematic illustration of all of these layers. The first was fibrous layer. The fibrous layer consists of sclera and cornea. I'm going to give you more detailed information later. The second layer, vascular layer, consists of three main components: iris, ciliary body, and choroid. And the second inner layer, which is also called retina, consists of two layers: pigmented layer and neural layer. Of course, retina itself consists of 10 layers. I will give more information later. What about tunica fibrosa bulbi? Tunica fibrosa bulbi is the outermost, the most dense fibrous layer of the eyeball. The fibrous layer consists of sclera and cornea. So you can see the cornea. Cornea is the anterior portion of the fibrous layer, and sclera is the posterior portion of the fibrous layer. And sclera occupies the 3/4 of the eyeball. If we compare these two anatomical structures, we can say that cornea is, first of all, the anterior portion and the transparent portion of the eyeball. Cornea is transparent. Of course, in this illustration, you cannot see transparency because cornea and these transparent organs, they keep their transparency only in live animals, of course. And because this is a fresh material, we cannot see anyway this transparency. And the scleral part, which is the posterior part of the eyeball, the most dense and not transparent whitish organ, which mainly consists of lots of collagen fibers, and there are some amount of elastic fibers which are dispersed between these collagen fibers. So what is the function of the elastic fibers, and what is the function of elastic fibers inside the sclera? The function of these fibers is to give the resistance to the eyeball and to protect the eyeball from the internal pressure, and as well as protect from the external pressure. This external pressure, you know that external pressure is exposed by the extraocular muscles. What else? Here you can see again this white part is the sclera. Of course, all this part of the sclera. Sclera has different thickness in the different parts of the eyeball. The thickest part of the sclera is close to the posterior polus, close to the optic nerve. The thinnest part is close to the equator of the eyeball. Here the thickness is 0.5 millimeters, here 2 millimeters. Besides, the sclera has special area in the posterior part, which is called area cribrosa. Area cribrosa is the part through which the arteries, the veins, the vessels and nerves pass and comes out from the eyeball. What about the connection of the sclera with the cornea? The point where the sclera is connected to the cornea is called this part. It's called cornea-scleral junction. Cornea-scleral junction is very important, anatomically is very important structure, because here in the external as well as in the internal part we have several important organs. First of all, in the internal part of this junction we have ciliary body. You can see here the ciliary body. The ciliary body locates in the internal part of this junction. Besides, there is venous plexus. Here you can see the venous plexus. Of course, in this illustration, it looks like a small point, but the venous plexus is like a channel, and in some literature, this venous plexus is also called Schlemm channel. So what is the function of this Schlemm channel, of this venous plexus? The function is to provide the drainage of the humor, of the water, of the liquid, roughly saying, which locates in the camera, in the chambers of the eyeball. So I think that you most of all heard about the disease which is called glaucoma. Glaucoma is the disease when the intraocular pressure is increased. So what is the reason of this disease? The main reason is the disbalance between the synthesis of the liquid, of the eye liquid, which is called aqueous humor, and the level of its drainage. If the liquid cannot be drained from this venous plexus, the intraocular pressure can be increased, and this causes problems to the whole eye as well as to the optic nerve. So it can even lead to the blindness. So here you can see again the sclera. You can see the differences. It's opaque, whitish organ, the dense organ. And here you can see the cornea. This part is the border between the sclera and cornea and is called cornea-scleral junction. From the outer surface, the cornea-scleral junction is called scleral groove or sulcus sclerae in Latin. Then here you can see more clearly the scleral venous sinus or Schlemm channel. So here even you can see the directions of the aqueous humor. Aqueous humor can easily be drained through this venous plexus. And as I said, in the case of this disbalance, this problem can cause glaucoma. What about the cornea? Cornea is the anterior part and the most transparent organ of the eyeball, the external surface of the eyeball. The most prominent part of the cornea is called vertex, the most prominent part, while the periphery is called limbus. Vertex and limbus. Cornea itself consists of 5 main layers. The first and the outer layer is called anterior epithelium. Then the second layer, which is called the Baumann layer here, is also called anterior limiting lamina. The biggest, the thickest part of the cornea is called substantia propria. Then we have the fourth layer, which is called deciment membrane. Another name of deciment membrane is posterior limiting lamina. And there is endothelium. Endothelium is also called posterior epithelium. As I already said, the cornea is transparent. But you can ask how and why the cornea is transparent. The main reason and the main factors which provide this transparency, first of all, is that cornea is a vascular organ. The cornea doesn't have any blood vessels, and because of that, it's transparent. So if you imagine the organ with blood vessels, of course, this organ cannot be transparent. Besides this, the factors, so there's no blood vessels, as we said. Besides, there are very low amount of cells. There are more fibers, there are more collagen fibers, the keratinocytes, but amount of cells is really very few. Besides, the cornea from the outside is covered by the tear film, a special, very tiny membrane, very thin membrane, which covers the cornea from the outside, protect and always keep the cornea moist, and of course provide transparency. And the last factor which provides transparency is the ability of the endothelium, this inner layer, to diffuse the water and special ions which provide and give this transparency to the cornea. Again, another question, you can have another question that, so if the cornea doesn't have any blood vessels, how the cornea get nutrients? The cornea get nutrients from 3 main ways. First of all, from the tear film. Tear film, you know, is produced by the lacrimal gland. The second is from the aqueous humor, which is produced by the ciliary body, and the third from the capillary loops of the ciliary body. So there are 3 main sources which give nutrients to the cornea. Okay, the next layer is the vascular layer. Vascular layer is called tunica vasculosa bulbi. It's the middle layer of the eyeball and has lots of functions. Tunica vasculosa itself consists of 3 main parts. There is choroid, there is ciliary body, and iris. In general, I will tell you the main functions of this organ, of this layer. I should mention that vascular layer provides, first of all, the nourishment of the retina, gives nutrients to the retina and generally to the organs like the iris and ciliary body. Besides, the ciliary body is the organ of accommodation and provides adaptation of the eye to the near vision and to the distant vision. Besides, iris is the organ which regulates the amount of light which enters the eyeball. What else? Ciliary body also produces the aqueous humor, and as I said, this aqueous humor is necessary for the nutrition of the cornea, besides cornea, lens, vitreous body, and all transparent organs of the eyeball. So here you can see the vascular layer. I'd like to show you this middle layer, this red layer is the vascular layer, tunica vasculosa, and it consists of 3 main parts. Choroid is the largest portion of the tunica vasculosa. Then we have ciliary body in the middle, and iris is the most anterior part of tunica vasculosa. So if we talk about the choroid in Latin, choroidea, consists of 4 layers. So choroid itself divides into 4 layers. There is suprachoroid layer, vascular, choroidocapillary layer, and basal lamina. Suprachoroid layer is the suprachoroid layer is the border between the sclera and between the choroid layer and provide the division of these 2 layers from each other. The vascular layer is the main layer, so you can see here the vascular layer of the choroid is a main layer which consists of lots of vessels, arteries and veins. Arteries here are presented by the ciliary arteries. They are short and long ciliary arteries, anterior and posterior ciliary arteries. And there is also veins, and veins are verticose veins. There are 4 verticose veins in the vascular layer. Besides all these elements, vascular layer also give branch to the choroidocapillary layer. And choroidocapillary layer is the most inner part of the choroid, which gives branch to the retina. So the function of the choroidocapillary layer is to nourish retina. Okay, so here again you can see the blood vessels. Here you can see the arteries and veins which compose the vascular layer of the eyeball. And besides here you can see the very important, very interesting structures which are called the circles of the iris. So iris has 2 arterial circles, circus arteriosus major et minor. So here you can see the small arterial circus here and large arterial circus here. The function of the circus is to supply the iris, ciliary body, and the organs of the anterior part of the eyeball. Another very interesting and really structure which is not present in the human is tapidum lucidum. Tapidum lucidum is also related to the middle layer of the eyeball, and this layer is called located between these 2 layers, between the vascular layer and choroidocapillary layer, so between the 2nd and 3rd layer of the choroid. And you can see that it has a very interesting color. So what is this layer? The function of this layer is to provide the vision of animals at night, so provide dark vision. Because of this layer, animals, for example, like a cat, they can see much better at night than humans don't have this layer. Absolutely, this layer is found only in the animals. But among all domestic animals, this layer is found in all domestic animals except the pig. So there is no such layer in the eyeball of the pig. This layer consists of special substances. There is zinc and cysteine. There are special rods, and these rods has these components. These components have an ability to absorb the light, then to multiply this light and then reflect it again. So here you can see the schematical illustration of the eyeball in the human body and cat eye. As I said, there is no tapidum lucidum in the eyeball of the human. Because of that, the light which enters the eyeball just absorbed by the retina and then sent to the optic nerve. However, in the cat eye, the light entered the eyeball, reached the choroid, tapidum lucidum. Here, the light is multiplied several times and then reflected again to the retina. So retina gets much more information from the outside and much more energy, photic energy from the outside, and because of that, the animals can see better at night. So again, I would like to repeat that this layer is absent in the pig. The color of tapidum lucidum can be very different. In the horse and in the ox, the color is like this, blue color. However, in the cat, this color is yellow, in the dog is green. So these colors can be different, but generally you can see how the tapidum lucidum looks. The next portion of the tunica vasculosa is the ciliary body. Ciliary body is called corpus ciliare, and so I hope you can see in the illustration. So if we make dissection of the eye, if we make dissection of the eyeball, we can see the lens in the center, and just around the lens we can see the ciliary body. So again, I'd like to show you here ciliary body. Here we have lens, and the organ which surround the ciliary body, surround the lens, is called ciliary body, corpus ciliare. What is the function, though? Here again you can see some part of the ciliary body. Ciliary body consists of two, so very clear illustration. Again, here we have lens in the center, and the ciliary body which locates out around the lens. I'd like to show this illustration. So what is the function of the ciliary body? Ciliary body consists of two main parts. There is crown of the ciliary body and the ring of the ciliary body. Crown of the ciliary body is called also pars plicata because there are lots of processes. So here you can see this is crown part. There are lots of processes, and because of that this part is called pars plicata. There are lots of folds in this region. And there is also a part which is called the orbiculus ciliaris, the orbiculus ciliaris, or the ring of the ciliary body. And this part, the ring, is called pars plana. Why pars plana? Because there are no folds in this region. So what about the processes? So you can see there are lots of processes close to the crown part of the ciliary body, and these processes also give rise to the special suspensory ligaments. These suspensory ligaments are called zonal fibers, and these zonal fibers start from periphery of the ciliary body and goes to the center, to the lens, and attach to the capsule of the lens. The main function of the ciliary body and these suspensory ligaments is to suspend the lens. So you can see here too. So these ligaments, they suspend the lens, and also by the contraction of the ciliary body, they can change the shape of the lens. What happens when the lens changed its shape? So because of this process, which is called accommodation, so here you can see accommodation, the lens can provide can provide the adaptation of our eye to near vision and to the distant vision. So inside the ciliary body, there is ciliary muscle, musculus ciliaris. This musculus ciliaris can contract, and the contraction of musculus ciliaris can change the tension of these suspensory ligaments, and as a result, the lens can change its shape. So here you can see the first situation when the ciliary muscle is contracted. When the ciliary muscle is contracted, these ligaments are not under the tension, and because of that the lens becomes more rounded. When the lens is rounded, we can see the objects, an animal can see the objects which locates close to us. However, when the ciliary muscle is relaxed, these suspensory ligaments are under the tension, and they can make the lens more flattened. When the lens is more flattened, the animals can see the objects which locate far from them in some distance. So relaxation of the ciliary body causes far vision, accommodation and contraction can cause near vision. Which systems regulate this process? Remember that parasympathetic and sympathetic nervous system regulate these processes. The sympathetic nervous system causes a relaxation of the muscle. So here you can see the relaxation of the ciliary muscle, while the parasympathetic system can cause contraction of the ciliary muscle. So parasympathetic is responsible for close vision, while sympathetic system is responsible for the far distant vision. I have already talked about this, so about the glaucoma and about the intraocular pressure. I'd like to mention that the aqueous humor is also the liquid which is produced by the ciliary body. The capillary loops of the ciliary body produce aqueous humor. So aqueous humor is a liquid which consists of lots of amount of amino acids, ascorbic acids, lots of microelements, ions, and glucose, and which is necessary. This liquid is necessary for the nutrition of the lens, cornea, and vitreous body. So this liquid is produced by the ciliary body. So you can see that the ciliary body has lots of functions, has very important functions for the eyeball. One of them is accommodation, and second is production of the aqueous humor, which is necessary for the nourishment of the vascular organs of the eyeball. And as I already told about it, the disbalance between the secretion of this liquid by the ciliary body and drainage of this liquid can cause glaucoma and increase of the blood pressure. Increase of not blood pressure, intraocular pressure. Increase of intraocular pressure can cause damage of the optic nerve, and as a result, this can lead to the blindness. The next organ is the iris. Iris is the most anterior part of the tunica vasculosa, or the vascular layer. Iris, so here you can see the iris, and the internal part of the iris is the pupil. So here you can see also the schematic illustration of the iris and the pupil. So this is an iris. In Latin, this organ is called iris. The main components of the iris is fibers. First of all, the dense connective tissue. This connective tissue, the main portion is composed of collagen fibers. Besides, there are lots of blood vessels, nerve fibers, and pigmented cells. So generally, I'd like to mention that the vascular layer, the tunica vasculosa as a whole organ, so the choroid, the ciliary body, the iris, all of these organs all of these organs have high amount of pigment cells, and the function of pigment cells is to absorb the light and prevent the scattering of the light. The internal part of the iris is the pupil. Iris has two margins. The free margin, which is called pupillar margin, margo pupillaris, and margo ciliaris is the periphery of the iris, which attaches to the ciliary body. Besides all of these blood vessels, nerves, and pigment cells, the iris is also has smooth muscle. So inside the iris there is smooth muscle. The smooth muscle, this smooth muscle is related to the intrinsic muscles of the eyeball, and the contraction of these muscles can regulate the amount of light which enters the eyeball. So here you can see the two types of smooth muscles. So why I try to highlight the smooth muscle, because this muscle, I hope that students don't confuse these muscles with the extraocular muscles, which are voluntary muscles. They are striated muscles. The muscles of the iris are smooth muscles, and they are involuntary, and they don't depend, their contraction doesn't depend on our willing to contract this muscle or no. So there are two types of muscles, two types of smooth muscles. There's circular muscle and radiate muscle. Circular muscle locates close to the pupil, and radiate muscle locates around the circular muscle. When the circular muscle is contracted, this causes meiosis. Meiosis is the contraction of the diameter of the eye of the pupil. The pupil becomes smaller. This muscle is called musculus sphincter pupillae. Another muscle is the musculus dilator pupillae, which provide contraction of which can cause mydriasis. Mydriasis when the diameter of the eyeball become larger. So you know that. I think all students have enough information about that. That when we have intense light, there's special corneal, special pupillar reflex. So when there is intense light, the musculus sphincter pupillae is contracted. When there is a low amount of light, so dim light, this can cause the mydriasis of the pupil. The pupil of the different domestic animals is really different. So if we look at the structure of the eyeball of the pupil of the different domestic animals, we can see that different domestic animals have different shape of the pupil. So here you can see the pupil of the cat. This is oval pupil, and the contraction of this oval pupil form the vertical slit. It looks like a vertical slit. What about the ox, generally ruminant? They have also oval pupil, but this oval pupil has horizontal, looks like a horizontal slit. Another illustration: the horse also has oval pupil, but this oval pupil again locates horizontally. The first question, why this pupil has horizontal shape, not has oval shape, not round shape. First of all, because besides these muscles, besides usual muscles which are found in the eye of all animals, these animals also have fibers which are located like a grid-like, in the grid-like shape. The contraction of grid-like shape fibers can cause the oval, formation of the oval eyelid. Another question, why some animals have oval shape, some rounded shape? Why some animals have horizontal located pupil and other animals have vertical slit pupil. It depends on the lifestyle of the animals, first of all, and this process is regulated by their adaptation, so to their lifestyle. The animals which are predators, they mainly have eyeballs which are vertically, which looks like a vertical slit, while the animals which are hunted animals, they have horizontally slit eyeballs. So the vertical slit eyeball provide more clear and more exact determination of the distance to the predator, to the hunt. So these animals, because they are predators, they can, by contraction of these pupils, they can easily and they can more clearly determine the distance from them to the hunt, to the prey. What about these animals? So cow is not a predator, this hunted animal, and having the horizontal slit pupil help them to see the periphery of the eye, the surroundings of the animal, and always keep eye on the predator, and they can protect themselves from the predators. So again, first of all, the lifestyle. This is just evolutionary adaptation of these animals to their lifestyle. The inner layer, the third layer of the eyeball is the inner layer, which is called retina. Retina itself consists of two parts, the visual part of the retina and non-visual part of the retina. The visual part of the retina consists of pigmented layer, which is outer layer, and internal neural layer. So pigmented outer layer and internal neural layer. One non-visual part consists of ciliary part and iridescent part. So here you can see the retina, the most internal part, the tunica interna bulbi or retina. This is the innermost layer of the eyeball. And as I said, it consists of visual and non-visual part. Non-visual part, we said, is divided into ciliary part and iridescent part. Ciliary part is the part of the retina which covers iris, this part. Ciliary part which covers the ciliary body. So why this part is non-visual? Because you know that light enters in this direction, so from the cornea, lens, and then to retina. And because of that, this part remains without any irritation. So the main visual part locates in the posterior part of the eyeball. And of course, this part is the largest portion of the retina. What else I'd like to mention? I hope I have illustration here. Just I'd like to show you here the border between the visual part and non-visual part. I think in this illustration you can see clearly the border between the non-visual part of retina and the visual part of retina is called ora serrata. Ora serrata is a border between these two visual and non-visual parts of the retina. Okay, what about the cellular structure of the retina? Retina consists of 10 layers, and these 10 layers are presented by 3 groups of neurons. So here you can see the first neuron, the layer of the first neuron, the second layer, and the third layer of neurons. In this illustration, I hope that you can see all 10 layers clearly. The first layer, here we have the pigmented cells, lots of pigments which surround rods and cones. So here you can see the rods and cones. Rods and cones are the photoreceptors. The photoreceptors which are sensitive to the light and which accept they are the first cells which accept the information, the light stimuli from the external environment. Rods and cones, here you can see them, they have, so we call them rods and cones, just depends on the shape of the cells. And the rods are sensitive to the black, to the dark vision, while the cones are sensitive to the light vision, to the color vision mainly. And there are special pigments in these receptors. The rods has the pigment which is called rhodopsin. Cones has pigment which is called iodopsin. And when these cells get the light stimuli can cause the destroying of these pigments, rhodopsin and iodopsin, and can convert, as a result, they convert these light stimuli into the chemical energy. Then rods and cones forms the second layer. The second layer is called outer nuclear layer. The third layer is outer plexiform layer. Then here you can see the layer of the second neurons. Second neurons are bipolar neurons, and they form the inner nuclear layer. Then there is internal plexiform layer, and the third neuron. Third neuron is presented by the ganglionic cells. There are ganglion cells, and ganglion cells give fibers which together form the optic nerve. So three types of neurons. First of all, rod and cones, bipolar neurons, and ganglionic cells. The optic nerve is formed by the axons of the by the nerve fibers of the ganglionic layer. Here you can see the schematic illustration of the fundal part of the bottom of the eyeball, which is called fundus bulbi. I think that all students know that there is blind spot in the bottom of the retina. The blind spot is the portion of the retina where the optic nerve just goes out from the eyeball. Why this portion is called blind spot? Because there are no cones and there are no rods, and because of that, there is no vision in this part of the eyeball. And there is also macula, which is called yellow spot, and is mainly found in the human eyeball, in the human retina. But in the animals has another very interesting structure which is not found in the fundal part of the retina of the human. Is it the area centralis striiformis? This part, area centralis striiformis. Area centralis striiformis consists of neurons and high amount of neurons, interneurons, and cones. Scientists consider that the main function of this area is to help the animal to detect the movements. So by the help of this area, the animals can easily detect the movements of the prey. I forgot to tell you something about the cells of the retina. As I said, there are different types of neurons, there are interneurons, there are photoreceptors in the retina, but beside these cells, there are also accessory cells, which are called Muller cells. So here you can see these Muller cells are the cells which are related to the glial cells, and they mainly provide the nourishment of the neurons of the retina. So beside the main neurons, there are of course additional cells which helps in the nourishment. What about the inner part of the eyeball? These all structures, so fibrous layer, tunica vasculosa bulbi, tunica fibrosa bulbi, tunica interna bulbi, are the three main concentric layers, are the main walls of the eyeball. But besides, there's also inner part of the eyeball, which is in some books, in some literature, is also called the nucleus of the eyeball. Nucleus of the eyeball consists. The internal part of the eyeball consists of three main chambers. The first chamber is anterior chamber. So this part is the anterior chamber. Anterior chamber is the space, is the region between the cornea. So here we have cornea and iris. So this small space is called anterior chamber, camera anterior. The second chamber is posterior chamber, which locates between the iris and lens and ciliary bodies. This very small slit, very narrow space between these organs is a posterior chamber. And the third, the biggest chamber is the vitreous chamber. So here you can see the biggest chamber, which is filled by the vitreous body. As I said, there is vitreous body in the vitreous chamber, while the anterior and posterior chamber is filled by the aqueous humor, which is synthesized, which is produced by the ciliary body. Besides these three chambers, there is also organs which compose the nucleus of the eyeball. These organs are the lens and vitreous body. What about the lens? So here you can see the lens. You can see the shape of the lens just independently, separately from the eyeball. The lens has, again, two curvatures, two surfaces, anterior surface and posterior surface. The anterior surface is more flat than the posterior surface. Beside the anterior, the lens has equator. You can see here equator, which is the middle part, the widest part of the lens. Remember that the lens is again a vascular organ. There is no blood vessels. It's highly elastic, highly refractile organ, and is one of the organs which provide the refraction of the light when it passes from the cornea, pupil into the eyeball. The lens consists mainly of the epithelial cells, but during the embryological development, these epithelial cells mainly occupy the anterior portion, the anterior part of the lens. Beside the epithelial cells, there is also capsule. The capsule covers the lens from the outside, and if you remember, I said that the capsule, the suspensory ligaments of the ciliary body are attached to the capsule of the lens. Beside, there is nucleus of the lens, and if we compare the consistency of the lens internally and externally, we can see that the internal part of the lens is much dense, more hard, while the periphery is softer than the internal part of the lens. Beside the epithelial cells, which you can see here, the most portion of the lens is made of the fibers, lens fibers. And these lens fibers are connected to each other by the sutures. So these lines you can see, as you can see here. The main components of the lens, the 70% of the lens is the water. But beside, there are also lots of proteins and microfilaments like actin, vimentin, and fibronectin, but the 70% of this organ is water. Again, the nutrition of this organ goes through the aqueous humor, which is produced by the ciliary body. There is no blood vessels inside the lens. Another organ is a vitreous humor. You can see here vitreous humor, which occupied the largest chamber of the eyeball, and the vitreous humor consists of 99% is the water in the vitreous humor. I hope you can see here, it is a lens, it is a vitreous humor. Lens has capsule, and because of that, lens has more clear shape, so more unchanged shape, while the vitreous humor, it has very few amount of cells, and because of that, there is no capsule, just membrane of the vitreous body which cannot keep the shape of this organ. The vitreous body, which is called corpus vitreum, consists, as I said, 99% of the water, and only some 1% there is hyalocyte, the cells which locates at the periphery of the eyeball, of the vitreous body. And there is also hyaluronic acid, proteoglycans, hyaluronic acid, which compose the main component of the vitreous body. I'd like to show you here. So here you can see the lens and the vitreous body. Vitreous body in the center has a special, you can see the channel, which is called hyaloid channel. Hyaloid channel is absent in the horse, but present in the other animals. What is this? What is a hyaloid channel? Hyaloid channel is a remnant of the hyaloid artery, which present during the embryological development. The function of this artery was to nourish the lens, but of course after the finishing the embryological development, this hyaloid artery turns into the hyaloid channel. And remember, this channel is absent in the horse. So here you can see, so of these all organs which I showed you can be easily found during the dissection of the eyeball. So unfortunately, this year we cannot do this laboratory lesson, but last year with my students, we made dissections at our veterinary clinic. So here you can see the eyeballs of the cow, and we made dissections, and here you can see more clearly the vitreous body, so it looks like a gel, and here you can see the lens. Here the lens looks more transparent because it was very fresh material, and here you can see our work with students, so we found all these elements. We found tapidum lucidum, so here you can see, and I hope that next year we can do this laboratory lesson again with my students. But these all organs are easily found during the dissection of the eyeball. What about the adnexa of the eyeball? Adnexa is the accessory organs of the eyeball, the organs which help information of the image. So the main components of the adnexa are the ocular muscles, eyelids, lacrimal apparatus, orbit or orbita in Latin, and blood vessels and the nerves. So what about the orbit? Orbit locates in the cone-shaped part of the skull, and there are lots of bones which participate in the formation of the orbit. So here you can see the skull of the cattle, and here you can see the orbit of the cattle. The orbit is fully surrounded by the bony ring. I'd like just to show you to compare you some of the skulls of the animals. So this is the skull of the, and this is the orbit of the cattle. Here you can see again orbit of the cattle, orbit of the horse. It is horse. But if we look at the orbit and the skull of the carnivores, we can see some differences. In the ruminants, in the horse, the orbit is fully surrounded by the bony ring, and this orbit continues with a temporal fossa and pterygopalatine fossa. However, in the carnivores, you can see that there is no fully bony ring. You cannot see the whole bony ring which surround the orbit. And this bony ring in live animals are compensated by the orbital ligament. So here you can see again the orbit, which locates inside the eyeball, which locates inside the orbit. There is periorbita, which covers the orbit. Periorbita derives from the periosteum. Beside there is fat tissue. Fat tissue is called corpus adiposum, and this fat tissue cushions the eyeball and also facilitate the movement of the eyeball inside the orbit. Beside there are fascia, which cover the muscles of the eyeball. Muscles of the eyeball can be divided into the extrinsic, intrinsic, and palpebral muscles. We already talked about the intrinsic muscles. Intrinsic muscles are the muscles of the ciliary body and pupillar muscles. And as I said, these muscles are regulated by the sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous system. What about the extrinsic muscles? Extrinsic muscles of the eyeball are striated muscles. They are voluntary muscles, and their contraction depends on our willing, of the animal. And so there are 6 main, in one eyeball, there are 6 main muscles of the eyeball, 6 main extraocular muscles. These muscles are the dorsal and ventral straight muscles, then medial and lateral and medial straight muscles, and 2 oblique muscles, musculus obliquus dorsalis and ventralis. Besides these, so 4 straight muscles and 2 oblique muscles, there is also 2 muscles, which one of them is muscle which provide the retraction of the eyeball, musculus retractor bulbi, and muscle which elevate the upper eyelid. So here you can see the schematic in this illustration. You can see how these muscles move the eyeball. So mainly the dorsal and ventral muscles provide the movement of the eyeball around the medial and lateral axis, the medial and lateral around the ventral and dorsal axis, and the oblique muscles can rotate the eyeball. What about the palpebra? Palpebra is eyelid. Palpebrae eyelids are also accessory organs of the eyeball. Palpebra, there is 3 types of palpebra in the animals. There is upper eyelid, lower eyelid, and the 3rd eyelid, palpebra tertia. Palpebra tertia is also called membrana nictitans. So here you can see the upper eyelid, lower eyelid, and the 3rd eyelid. The eyelid has 3 main layers. From the outside there is skin which covers the palpebra. The internal part is covered by the mucus, and mucus is the conjunctiva, palpebral conjunctiva, and the internal part of the palpebra is made by the muscular fibrous tissue. There is muscles and fibrous tissue. So there's tarsal cartilage, which is called the tarsal cartilage of the palpebra. What about the 3rd eyelid? Here you can see the 3rd eyelid. The base of the 3rd eyelid is T-shaped cartilage, and this 3rd eyelid in the internal part of the third iris, there's lymphoid tissue. In the case of inflammation or an infection, this lymphoid tissue can be swelled and it can cause also further inflammation of further development of the inflammation. What about the structure of the lacrimal apparatus? The lacrimal apparatus is the structure has several elements. First of all, the lacrimal gland. So here you can see the lacrimal gland. Lacrimal gland locates in the lateral part of the orbit, in the lateral part of the orbit, close to the temporal region. Then there is lacrimal canaliculi, lacrimal sac, and nasolacrimal duct. The lacrima, so the lacrimal gland produces secret, which by means of small ducts open on the surface of the eyeball. Then this tear goes to the medial part, the medial angle, which is called medial canthus of the palpebra. There is caruncula in this part. From the caruncula, the lacrima enters the canaliculi and then opens into the nasolacrimal duct. Depends on the type of the animals, for example, a dog or horse, the nasolacrimal duct can open into the different parts. For example, in the horse, mainly nasolacrimal duct open just below the nares. However, in the ducts, in the third of the ducts, the nasolacrimal duct opens just under the ventral nasal concha, in the ventral nasal meatus. Then, the blood supply and the innervation of the eyeball. The blood supply of the eyeball, the main source of the eyeball is the external ophthalmic artery, which takes its origin from the maxillary artery. Then the arteries gives lots of branch to the eyeball. The main branch are the short and brave posterior ciliary arteries, and there is also anterior ciliary arteries. Besides, the very important artery of the eyeball is arteria centralis retina, which provide the main nutrients to the retina, to the inner surface of the eyeball. And the innervation of the eyeball, of course, there are lots of nerves. I'd like to show you these illustrations. There are lots of nerves which innervate the eyeball. First of all, there are optic nerve. Optic nerve is the second cranial nerve, which takes its origin from the retina. Then it continues, it goes through the optic foramen and form the optic chiasma. Then optic chiasma go to the thalamus and then to the cerebral cortex, to the visual area of the cerebral cortex. Besides the second cranial nerve, there is third, fourth, and sixth cranial nerves which provide the innervation of the extraocular muscle. The third is nervus oculomotorius, the fourth is nervus trochlearis, and sixth is nervus abducens. These cranial nerves provide innervation of the extraocular muscles. Besides, there is nervus trigeminus. Nervus trigeminus gives the branch which is called nervus ophthalmicus, and this is sensory nerve and give lots of branch, lacrimal, infratrochlear, trochlear branch, nasociliary branch, which gives sensory innervation to the eyeball. And of course the facial nerve, and the facial nerve is the branch which provides mainly the innervation of the lacrimal gland and also the innervation of the musculus orbicularis oculi, which surround the eyeball. So you can see that the eyeball has really a very rich innervation because it provides really very delicate, very gentle, as well as very complex process in our body. So here you can see the visual pathway of the eyeball. Of course, this is the schematic illustration of the human visual pathway. And here you can see the optic nerves, the optic chiasma, which continue into the thalamus and lateral geniculate nucleus. And then these nerve fibers finish at the cerebral cortex of the brain. So this topic is really very big topic, and I tried to finish to give you maximum information during this 1 hour. But of course, everyone who has information, who has questions, I don't know, are there any questions?
We have all good reactions, but we don't have any questions.
Okay, thank you. So if you have any question, my students, we have a group organized online lessons. They can write your questions. I hope that this lecture was very useful for you, and thank you very much for your attention.